As Christians, we often pray for people. The Bible teaches that prayers actually do something. And many of us have been praying and doing other things to help the victims of the October 7th massacre in Israel. This goes without saying. But I'd also like to ask everyone watching to pray for Hamas, and I'd like to offer you two things that will explain my request. First, Jesus himself says, "Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." Now, this is not to paper over or excuse the behavior of Hamas fighters. Only a freakishly perverse person could possibly attempt to justify what they did. But this is a command of Jesus, and one that he himself put into practice when he prayed for the forgiveness of the very people who were killing him. Second, I'd like you to join me in watching a video featuring Douglas Murray, a British author and political commentator. In many circles, he is very controversial. But I'd like you to listen, please, to his response to watching videos recorded by Hamas soldiers as they killed innocent Israeli civilians on October 7th, 2023.
I think what I saw yesterday is by some margin worse than anything I've seen before. And I've been in Nigerian villages when a suicide bomber goes into the church on a Sunday and blows everyone up. And then people chase people through the fields shooting them. I've seen enough exit wounds from children's bodies. But the footage of the 7th of October is a level of depravity that, yes, not even the Nazis did. Because the whole time they're massacring, and I think the film was we saw about 10% of all the bodies that Hamas, the people that Hamas killed that day. Throughout the whole thing, the Hamas fighters are in a state of utter elation. Utter elation.
Were the Nazis in a state of utter elation as they gassed the Jews?
Even the descriptions of the Einsatzgruppen, who were shooting Jews in the back of the head in trenches, fall into trenches, grave pits that they'd made the Jews dig for themselves. Even when you read the accounts, both from the very, very few survivors and from those who witnessed it and those who partook in it, say that the soldiers had to actually be, weirdly enough, protected from their acts by getting incredibly drunk in the evenings. Yeah. And trying to forget what they'd been made to do. The Hamas terrorists are utterly elated and delighted by what they're doing. I said this yesterday, but I really don't want to hear Allahu Akbar shouted again on my streets. It's a war cry. The Hamas terrorists are shouting Allahu Akbar all the way through, as they are using a shovel to decapitate a young man. With every blow of the shovel, they shout Allahu Akbar. When they go in to rape and murder all these young women in a room, they're shouting Allahu Akbar the whole time. When they find a young woman hiding under a table, pretending to be dead, and they realize she's alive, and they begin killing her, they're shouting Allahu Akbar all the time. And they're so elated. And they phone home. We've got the telephone calls now. They phone home. One disgusting young Hamas guy shouts from the phone of one of his victims, his father in Gaza, saying, "I have killed with my own hands 10 Jews. Your son has killed 10 Jews." And the mother is put on the phone and they're all shouting Allahu Akbar and they're so proud of him.
The level of infernal depravity required to do these things cannot be adequately captured in any human language. This is why Hamas needs prayers. These are people who are still made in the image of God, even though they have done everything possible to behave like they are anything but. These people are convinced of a delusion, a 1,400-year-old lie. They love so much of what God hates, and unless they change, they will receive his unending wrath once their lives here on this earth are over. I despise what Hamas has done as much as anyone, and as a Christian, I am convinced that if my family and I were to fall into the hands of Hamas fighters, I would be murdered, and my wife and daughters would share my fate after having been violated repeatedly. Every member of Hamas, like every other extremist, is a blight on this world, a scourge of all that is good and decent. Nevertheless, they are God's creations, and as long as they have breath in their bodies, they are not beyond the reach of redemption. Abraham Lincoln once said, "Do I not destroy my enemies when I make them my friends?" What if members of Hamas and other terrorist organizations were to change, and instead of crying Allahu Akbar, they confessed Jesus is Lord? Now, I'm under no illusion that there will be any mass conversions of Hamas fighters to the Christian faith. But if it were one, only one, would not this world be an immeasurably better place? That's why I'm asking you to pray for Hamas. We don't pray for them because they deserve it. We pray for them because they don't. No one does. That's why the gospel seems so strange in a world littered with the wreckage of vengeance and retaliation. It's a message and a mission to find people who don't deserve the love of God and make them part of His people. A better world is within our reach, and the very least that we can do is pray. It reminds me of the immortal beauty of the song Amazing Grace. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me.